Welcome to the start of your expedition with Lindblad and National Geographic Expeditions, where we're going to be taking you to the Antarctic, South Georgia and the Falklands. We embarked the National Geographic Explorer in the southernmost city in the world, Ushuaia, and then we headed out the very picturesque Beagle Channel across the Drake Passage.
We haven't even sighted land in Antarctica and we've already encountered killer whales.
And we're aiming to get you south of the Antarctic Circle. From there, we'll make our way up the Antarctic Peninsula, taking in all the mountains, the channels, the icebergs. We're going to head north along the Antarctic Peninsula and into the Weddell Sea, where we're going to get the chance to encounter some of the large tabular icebergs which drift around the Antarctic continent. And then on towards South Georgia. South Georgia is an amazing place, best described as the Serengeti of the Southern Ocean, where we plan to spend several days exploring the beaches, some of the large king penguin colonies, seeing some of the elephant seals, and of course, fur seal pups. We're also looking forward to the whales that are now starting to come back around South Georgia. We'll then head towards the Falklands, so you will see wildlife and farm animals all together in some places. For me, it's a great chance to share part of my home with all of you and to see three incredible different destinations and so many different things. We're very much looking forward to sharing this expedition with you and making it an experience of a lifetime. And once again, welcome on board on National Geographic Explorer.
We've finished our long crossing of the Drake Passage, and today we've made our first landing at Red Rock Ridge. It's a spectacular site and on the Antarctic continent, south of the Antarctic Circle, which we can seldom reach. It's a classic Antarctic scene here. Big icebergs filling the bay around us, towers of rock that have been eroded by the glaciers. The thing that makes this really feel Antarctic is that it looks barren. Ice and rock. There's lots to see here, lots of life, but practically no plants. And that really defines the Antarctic Peninsula for me. This is a colony of Adelie penguins, which are the smallest of the three brush-tailed penguins. And they are the species that is most tied to the ice edge. They spend their winters out at sea where they feed on krill. We've come ashore at a time when the penguins' breeding season is finishing, because winter is not far away at all now. So these birds have mostly hatched and raised their young. Many of the young birds have already left the colony, and those remaining are mostly molting their feathers, getting ready to spend the winter out at sea. Penguins are, without any question, the iconic wildlife of the Antarctic. Here in our first landing, they are the stars. We have fantastic scenery all around us, but I think that today the penguins are going to capture everyone's attention because it's a pretty special thing to come ashore and see your first penguins. So welcome to Pourquoi Pas Island, named for Charcot's ship. I think it's a pretty cool name, Why Not Island. Gorgeous light of the glacier back there. Isn't that beautiful? Can you see the kind of green tone? Green ice is a rarity that you only see in low-angle sunlight. Pretty special to see. That mountain back there, the glacier receding with the light on it, beautiful blues in the sky. That is lovely. So all of this ice is glacial ice. There are 4 classes of glacial ice in the water. If it's more than 10 meters above the water, then it's an iceberg. Between 3 meters and 10 meters, it's a bergy bit. And between 1 meter and 3 meters, it's a growler. All the little stuff that's all around us are brash ice. But you can say that on average, in the center of the continent, the ice is about 2 miles thick. So it's been building up for a very long time and flowing in all directions from the center of the continent. And of course, Antarctica is the place in the world where there's more of that than anywhere in the world. Isn't this just a spectacular place to spend a little time in the evening after dinner? I think Porquapa Island is a very special place.
What I really enjoy about this is it's quiet out here and there's just so much wildlife all over. Whales on the right and penguins sliding off the iceberg on the left. And it's hard to know where to shoot your camera, and unfortunately starting to run out of batteries. I've shot so much out here, but just an absolutely gorgeous place. Love the icebergs. Love the cloudy, moody nature of the sea right now. What's not to love? Oh, there it is again. I think I'm going to stay out here for a while, till the battery's completely gone.
This morning we're at Port Lockroy, and this is a place with a lot of history. It was used in the early days by the whalers, and it later became a British base. It was part of a secret operation here during the Second World War, and after that it became a scientific base. Before we enter, we have to scrub our boots. We don't want to take in muck.
This is kind of our Antarctic cribs. The kitchen, not very fancy, but functional. And the incredible thing about this kitchen is they've left us a recipe book. Oh, look, brain fritters. 2 seal brains prepared. 4 reconstituted eggs, 2 tablespoons of butter, and some mixed herbs. That's all you need. This is the bedroom, and you can see that the men who were stationed here yearned for the pleasures of home and of the opposite gender. They dreamed about these ladies at the time. These were the pin-ups. And look, they've recreated their likeness here on the wall to remind them of things they couldn't have. I think that one's Elizabeth Taylor. They had reasonably comfortable clothing, bunks, warm stove, and they had to entertain themselves. So this one is their version of Monopoly. When you work at an Antarctic station, it's really important to have those moments where you can just relax. They had a library, they had a bar, so Gordon's Gin here, and a bar to serve from. You can't have a research base in Antarctica without doing science. That was the reason why the guys were here. After World War II, they were here doing ionospheric research, among other things. And wow, look at this piece of equipment.
It's just mind-boggling to imagine what they had to endure, why they came, what the motivations were, and the hardships with which they had to contend. So it's really an incredible experience to think about.
But we're going to conclude our tour here at Base A, Bransfield House, here at Port Lockroy on Goudier Island, a place where men worked, lived together, ate, drank, smoked, did science here in Antarctica from 1944 to 1962.
When I'm cleaning windows.
We are at the north end of the Antarctic Peninsula, the entrance to the Weddell Sea at a place called Brown Bluff. And the winter is starting to set in. And we see that in the cycle with the penguins. Adelies have already left the area, and the gentoos we find are at the end of the season in which they have to mold their feathers to be ready for the winter. So we have this idealistic view of penguins. We think they're very cute and funny, but these are creatures that are one of the few species that is able to live and reproduce successfully in the worst climate this planet has to offer. They come to Antarctica and they breed by the millions to take advantage of the incredible amount of food and the space that is available here. These guys in the bathing pool, this is a safe place for them to learn. It may look like they're playing, but this is instinct practice taking place. They are learning how to swim, learning how to dive, escape predators, get the bubbles out of their feathers so they can compress them and go underwater. So this may look like a lot of fun, but it's something that later in life is going to keep them alive. These are the tools they need to go out into the ocean and survive. So they may look like they're cute and having fun, but they're actually learning how to be a seabird.
To be this close to this many penguins who just view you as a inquisitive thing is truly a privilege. They sort of investigate you.
And just sort of very benign curiosity. It's magnificent.
I was walking along the beach as soon as I looked over and saw the little pool, and they were playing and jumping up and down and laying on their bellies and swimming. It's like, this is it. It's big fluffy flakes come down. You can see them in the images, the blue in the ice, the black of these rocks, and then the contrast black and white of these birds. To be out here on this beach area, we had hopes for something like this. It's perfect.
Penguins are all feathered. The only group of birds that have feathers covering almost 100% of their body. And those feathers are one of their key adaptations that keep them alive, warm, and waterproof for hours and hours and hours, days and weeks on end, living here in the Antarctic in the very cold waters. So near the end of the breeding season, the adults are replacing adult penguin feathers, which is a costly investment for them. The adult birds that we're seeing during this process have gone out to sea for a couple weeks after their chicks have fledged. They've gotten fat. They might have put on 30–40% of their body weight. They come back to shore where they're not feeding. They molt those feathers. Every single feather is replaced with a whole new, brand new feather. During this molting process, all sorts of biological phenomena are taking place within the penguin's body. They are running a fever about 5 degrees above normal. They're probably experiencing aches and pains, and every single feather is being pushed out by the new feathers. This molting process for these birds is a miserable time of their life. It's really a remarkable process, and it's called a catastrophic molt. It drives home the point that to live in this environment, you have to have a really incredible set of adaptations and be a pretty darn tough animal.
One thing that impresses everyone who comes to Antarctica is what an otherworldly place it is. It's like nowhere else on the planet. And a big part of that is the ice. The landscape is dominated by ice, created by ice. Huge mountains towering straight up out of the sea, all carved by the glaciers. And the glaciers still tumbling down between them. There's so many forms of ice, and it catches the light in so many ways. It has so many different kinds of beauty, and like a sculpture garden in many places. Giant blocks of ice, ice cliffs, icebergs, and this is what makes Antarctica what it is. More than the penguins, more than the whales. On this expedition, we had the very special experience of visiting A68A, an iceberg that's 80 miles long. By seeing the largest piece of ice any of us will ever experience, brought it all together in a very special way.
Welcome to the South Orkney Islands. This beautiful archipelago of islands lay in 60 degrees south, and there are 4 different species of penguins breeding here. The main that we are going to see today is the chinstrap, and there are 140,000 pairs nesting. So let's try to get close to those penguins. And the chinstrap is one of the 3 species of the brush-tailed penguins that we see here in Antarctica, and actually are the smallest of the 3 species that we see here. As the name says, they have a strap in the chin. You see some of them in the upper parts, they're like brownish. Those are the juveniles. And all the others, they are adults. So as you can see, all the chinstraps, they are accumulating at the end of the rocks, and they just wait until there is a big number of them, and then one of them pushes the other, and then all of them just go into the water, because safety is in numbers. Not because they are especially keen on going into the water, because probably it's full of leopard seals, but because they need to go to the supermarket to get some food. But imagine that every time that you go to the supermarket, you have a polar bear just waiting for you to eat you. That's why they really have to time when they go into the ocean. But they need to go very often because they're chicks, they really need food, and also they need to really fat up before changing their feathers. So you have some chinstrap jumping. Here is a nice place for trying to get that beautiful picture of the chinstraps.
Just to let you know, on the east side of the little island in the channel, we do have a big leopard seal here. He's had a kill recently.
Ah, do you see it now? That's a big mama. Come here, you. Hello. So there we have one of the southern giant petrels, and they are crazy scavengers. They will just feed on anything that is dead, anything that is organic and is semi-alive or semi-dead, they will eat it. So you have the smaller, browner ones are the fur seals, and the ones that look like huge sausage, those are the Weddell seal. Hello.
South Georgia's 900 miles east of the Falklands, sitting out just on the cusp of the Southern Ocean. Best described as a slice of the Alps dropped in the Southern Ocean, covered with an ice cap, very, very rugged, immense peaks. Everything about South Georgia is dictated by the weather, the swell. It's completely exposed to the elements of the Southern Ocean. Approaching South Georgia, we had 40 knots of wind, and as we've come into the shelter, already we can see it raging outside.
So as you can see, we're in Geographic Fjord. It's a bit windy.
And we're starting our journey at South Georgia in Larsen Harbour and Drygalski Fjord, right at the eastern end of the island, and we're going to see our first glaciers here deep in the fjords. South Georgia is an incredible place to be, right up there with the highlights of any expedition anywhere in the world.
South Georgia, first day. We landed in Cooper Bay, perfect sunshine. This is our first experience with the tassel grass, the major plant that inhabits in South Georgia, and the macaronis all around. The macaronis choose really well-protected areas under the tassel grass to be protected from predators like skuas. To get to see them, we have to climb these mucky trails and try to find them in among the tassel.
Kind of equal parts disgusting and fascinating, isn't it?
The yellow feathers on their heads are a display feature that helps them obtain a partner during the breeding season. The sounds of South Georgia, the smells of South Georgia, everything in one day here at Cooper Bay.
Gold Harbour has got to be one of the most amazing beaches you could possibly visit. This beautiful, big sandy beach has got literally tens of thousands of king penguins living on the shore. They're an incredible melee of life, the smells, the sounds, the noises of this amazing throng of animals. It's actually almost too much to take in all at one time. When we look at the life history of these king penguins, they have the longest breeding cycle of any bird on the planet. We call them a tri-seasonal breeder. That means for every 3 years, they're only really managing to get 2 chicks out. And the parents, they invest a huge amount of energy in rearing these chicks. They're traveling vast kilometers and they're diving down hundreds of meters to catch their prey, which they're then bringing back to the rookeries. And when they come back to the rookeries, there are 2 birds that they need to communicate with. That's their mate and their chick. And even amongst this incredible throng of animals, tens of thousands of birds use auditory cues to identify those 2 birds. So what might look to us like a complete melee of noise is actually very organized.
It's impossible to describe what it's like to be surrounded by all of these birds and animals. And if we sit, they come to us. That's my favorite part. They come right up. They're walking right behind you right now. It's all just indescribably glorious to be surrounded by nature.
It's amazing to think that millions of years of evolution has created a bird quite so beautiful. When we look out across this scene of penguins with their perfectly white fronts and these glistening silver backs, the beautiful red of the bill and that ochre yellow on the ear patch, they look like a field of flowers. And it's such a real privilege to come to this remote corner of the earth and be able to witness this incredible mass of life.
The Southern Ocean is the rich feeding grounds that allows for a multitude of different species in the hundreds of thousands. Everywhere we walk on land, we're surrounded by animals. But we have to remember that all of these animals are sea animals. They make their living in the ocean. They only come up on land when they need to breed or molt. While we view them awkwardly on land, their home is in the ocean. A unique part of traveling with Lindblad Expeditions and National Geographic is that we have an onboard dive program. We're going in to bring back the complete picture of the ecosystems here. We started in Antarctica, on the peninsula. The banana belt to some, but the waters are still cold. There you'll find a lot of very big bergs floating around, as we noticed, and they go down much, much deeper than what they show. These ice bulldozers will scour the bottom and kill everything within the first 40 feet of the surface. But once you drop below that, it's amazing what you might find. Antarctica is full of colorful and unusual animals. Soft corals, sea stars, living in these cold temperatures. But they do, and they thrive. In South Georgia, the ice is not a very big obstacle. Here, kelp forests thrive. The macrocystis plant, it grows up from the bottom at depths up to 100 feet and creates an underwater jungle. This macroalgae provides food as well as habitat. Anything that can hide behind just a small blade of kelp will. Anything that can grab hold of a holdfast will. Life abounds in South Georgia. Of course, we're not unaccompanied during our dives. Fur seals by the dozens swarm around our heads, bluff charging and blowing bubbles. They're a delight to swim with. Now the Faulklands take it one step further. Not just macrocystis, but also shallow tree kelp that grows from the bottom, swaying in the breeze, and provides a sort of understory to the larger macrocystis. The polar waters are one of the least explored, least known, least understood places on our planet. Being one of the least explored, it is critical that their charm and interest is communicated. As the undersea specialist, it's my hope to inspire conservation of these rare and unusual and unexplored places.
Today we're at Stromness in front of Shackleton's waterfall. About 50 of us just completed the Shackleton Crossing Walk, the last part of his epic adventure in order to save the men left behind on Elephant Island. And this waterfall was the final obstacle on the way to Stromness Station and rescue. We've had an incredible day today. Beautiful weather, blue skies. But we must remember that when Shackleton did this walk in 1916, it was winter and full of ice and hardships. We're going to complete our hike by walking down this beautiful glacial outwash plain to the whaling station at Stromness, where Shackleton met the manager and planned the recovery and rescue of his men left at Elephant Island.
There's something between 4 and 6 million Antarctic fur seals on this small island of South Georgia. But it's not always been the way. Antarctic fur seals were hunted. They went from the millions down to 400 animals. After sealing ceased, they managed to repopulate, and today we see these hugely abundant animals once again on these beaches. Every landing we've been to, every beach, every bay, every islet is chock-a-block with these beautiful seals. Females give birth to their pup on the beach. For about a week, they're feeding them a really fat-rich milk. But then after that week, the female starts to return to the sea for longer periods. And then after about 4 months, those pups, they're independent, they're weaned. And they become more and more gregarious as they get older and older. And a little pup crash, a little gang of puppies that roll around on the beach together. And that's what we've fallen into here on the beaches in South Georgia. They're really quite funny and entertaining to watch. Cute little bodies scurrying around. They're going into rivers, heading into the sea, learning to swim. They're riding waves, trying to gain a bit of confidence in the water. And I think I might have even seen our video chronicler in there with them. It's absolutely adorable.
Well, I've been sitting here watching them all swim and play, and just the noises that the seals make, and all behind us, they're all coming up on you right now. The little baby seals running at you, and it's great that there's protections out there now and that people realize how valuable it is to have these animals in the ecosystem and just how lucky we are to have them. They're adorable.
All of this behaviour, of course, is really entertaining for us. But more than this, it's really amazing to be able to see this healthy population behaving in a way that's completely natural. When we visit Grytviken whaling station, we're coming to an incredibly interesting historical site. It's actually the first whaling station that was set up on South Georgia, and that happened back in 1904. Captain Carl Larsen, who first scouted South Georgia in the 1800s, and then he came back here with intent of catching the whales that he'd seen in abundance. And in the first season that they were operational, he'd only need to leave the mouth of this harbour, and they had a catch of 195 whales. That really rang in an incredibly dark period for the relationship between us humans and the whales that live here in the Southern Ocean. From there, numbers of whales taken increased and increased. The final death toll of whales in the Southern Hemisphere was actually about 2 million whales. And all of that whaling activity was centred around this small, inhospitable island of South Georgia. And what we see now is the ghost relics of what was once an incredibly bustling, vibrant period of industry. And in the mid-60s, it closed down. It would be lovely to say that it was public pressure, the movements against whaling, but unfortunately, they just ran out of whales. So what we see today is these large, dilapidated whale oil tanks, giving us a really nice indication of just the volume of whale oil that was taken. And it's only through investigating logbooks, visiting sites like this, listening to the stories of the past, that we can understand what a healthy future looks like for the Southern Ocean.
So here we are, Shackleton's final resting place. He returned one more time to these parts of the world on an expedition called the Quest Expedition. Arriving here on the 4th of January 1922, he became very reminiscent, and he went over his life, and he spoke about what a strange and wonderful place it was. And he was feeling unwell, and he called for his physician. His physicians told him that he should stop some of his habits, and shortly afterwards, in the early hours of the morning, he had a massive heart attack and died. The expedition continued, and when they got to Montevideo, Shackleton's wife said he will want to be buried here, so he returned. So we'll raise our glasses to the boss, take a sip, and you pour a little bit over the boss's gravesite. Because they wanted him to be facing south, to the south pole. That's why it's facing.
Encountering southern right whales like this is the most amazing experience. They're one of the most iconic whale species of the south. For an animal that was driven down to as few as 35 females around the coast of South Georgia. And today, the southern hemisphere population is thought to be in excess of 7,000 animals. The fin whales, the blue whales, humpback whales, and now the southern right whales that we've seen on our short stay here in South Georgia are all species that were heavily targeted by whaling and are all showing a real resurgence following that really dark period. It's the most amazing example of the resilience of nature if it's just given space to come back after such a horrific blow as whaling. And I just think it really shows that these animals are returning to these historic waters that they once lived in such abundance.
On Pride Island, there's roughly somewhere between 30 and 40 pairs of wandering albatross nesting here, either on their nests or flying about this incredibly wild place. These birds spend their entire lives, with the exception of the year where they're on the nests, out at sea, feeding in the Southern Ocean. They have the longest wingspan of any bird, somewhere in the order of 3.5 meters, or getting close to 12 feet in length. That adaptation alone affords the albatross to cover, in the course of just a few weeks, thousands of kilometers at sea foraging. In fact, there's one soaring by right now.
So we're just offshore, arriving in the Falklands. An incredible place. The archipelago stretches 90 miles north and south, and a total of 120 miles, which is around about the size of the state of Connecticut. But there's over 700 islands that make up the archipelago. The small town of Stanley, the capital of the Falklands, it's a colourful little town to walk around this time of year. We should still be seeing some nice flowers and plants in the garden. Nice shops to walk along, have a look in. The museum is a definite must, and that takes you from the early days of settlement in the Falklands up through the darker times of the Falklands in 1982, which most people know the Falklands for the conflict between Britain and Argentina over the sovereignty of the islands. We'll be going to islands that are lived on in the Falklands. The population of the Falklands is now around about 3,200, growing slowly, and Stanley is home to most of that population.
Rockhopper penguins are the smallest of the penguin species we find in the Falkland Islands, and they're quite possibly the hardiest penguin species as well. Their name is derived from their forming their colonies on the steepest, rockiest cliffs. Incredibly agile as they make their way up the steep rocky slopes, working their way towards their colonies. Crested penguins have these beautiful yellow tufts of plumage coming from above their eyebrows and extending out past their eyes, and these beautiful deep red eyes and a dark red colored bill. They're what we call an open ocean or pelagic penguin species. So once they leave the colonies, they're out at sea for months on end until they'll return as they literally hop up the rocks to begin the breeding season all over again. And certainly one of the highlights of traveling in the Falkland Islands is a chance to visit black-browed albatross colonies. The black-browed albatross nest in higher densities with one another. Their chicks are often at this stage still on the nest, quite large. We'll be able to witness birds being fed by their adults that have gone out to sea. These birds are large, they have incredibly well-adapted wings from an aerodynamic standpoint. You might catch glimpses of birds taking off from these cliffs, soaring overhead, making their approach to the nest, and appreciating why the Falkland Islands is such a haven for birds like black-browed albatross, because of the regular and reliable winds that are here.
Here we are on our last day, wrapping up 21 days, sailing to Antarctica, South Georgia and the Faulkland Islands. It has been an amazing experience, seeing beautiful landscapes, learning about the wildlife and the history of these extraordinary places. Thank you so much for choosing Lindblad Expeditions National Geographic. It's been a pleasure sailing with you, and we hope to do so again in the near future in a different part of the world.
And we've got a barbecue to finish off! Whoa. Up, up, up.
It was so wonderful to take a wonderful walk up to see the albatross and penguins and come back to a beautiful barbecue and beer. Cheers.
It's about the people.
Sandy and delicious.
And I'm enjoying it immensely.
Barbecue.
We're about to embark on one of the silly activities that we do on this wonderful journey. So here we go for the polar plunge.
But I'm not going in there, that's just craziness.